During Hollywood's golden age, mob-run nightclubs and casinos in places like Las Vegas and Galveston were hotspots for big-name performers, while studio bosses and gangsters often intersected behind the scenes. Notorious mobsters like Chicago's Sam Giancana and Los Angeles' Mickey Cohen counted many Hollywood stars among their acquaintances or patrons. FBI files and memoirs from that era document extortion attempts, insider deals, and enforced favors connecting entertainers to the underworld. Here are 17 stars who were dealt with by the mafia in that age. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra's connections to organized crime are legendary and well documented. He was close friends with Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana, and FBI agents noted that ties to known mafia members was so well known, the FBI had a file on Sinatra that reads like a guide to the era's organized crime figures. The FBI vault confirmed Sinatra was the target of multiple mafia-related extortion schemes and had documented contacts with subjects investigated in racketeering cases. He famously mixed in club circles run by mob financiers, and biographers report that the mafia even pressured studios on his behalf. His underworld ties were so notorious that when Sinatra sent friend Peter Lawford to lobby President Kennedy on behalf of Chicago mobster Giancana, the Justice Department cut them off, and Sinclair lost the support of the Kennedys. In short, FBI files and history books agree that Sinatra was a central figure linking Hollywood's glitz to the mob world. The Frank Sinatra dossier released by the Federal Bureau of Investigation spans 4 decades and shows his ties to known mafia members were so extensive that his file reads like a guide to the era's organized crime figures. The FBI confirmed Sinatra was the target of multiple mob extortion attempts and had documented contacts with subjects investigated in racketeering cases. Dean Martin. Dean Martin, another Rat Pack member and frequent Sinatra partner, likewise ran in mafia-influenced entertainment circles. Vegas mob boss Sam Maceo booked Martin to perform at his Galveston clubs, according to historians. FBI agents later noted that Gambino crime family capo Gregory Greg De Palma counted Dean among his personal contacts, along with Sinatra and other celebrities. In practice, Martin's ties were largely social and professional singing in mob-funded venues. But these connections were strong enough that FBI surveillance and crime reports list him among entertainers associated with organized crime figures. Martin's easygoing onstage persona masked a nightlife closely intertwined with mob casinos and backrooms, earning him a permanent spot on the mafia's list of friendly stars. Historians note that Dean Martin's association with organized crime figures extended beyond mere social acquaintances. Biographer Michael Friedland reports Martin had ties to the Cleveland gambling rackets, including men connected to James T. Lecavoli, and performed in clubs owned or controlled by mob-linked operators. Additionally, the Gambino crime family's captain, Gregory De Palma, counted Martin among his celebrity acquaintances. While no formal charges ever named Martin as a criminal participant, FBI surveillance files and mob investigation records place him firmly in the orbit of organized crime culture. Sammy Davis Jr., singer, actor, and fellow Rat Pack luminary, also found himself wrapped up in mafia affairs. He was often the subject of mafia-run casinos in Las Vegas and Hollywood nightclubs. In one famous incident, MGM studio chief Harry Cohen exploited underworld muscle to intervene in Davis's personal life. FBI-affiliated writer Jeffrey Sussman reports that, in the 1950s, Cohen arranged for mob associates to threaten Davis if he didn't end his interracial romance with actress Kim Novak. The FBI files record that Cohen even met with notorious gangsters to break up that relationship. In general, Davis performed frequently in mob-controlled venues and counted many high-profile gangsters as acquaintances. His memoirs and biographies note that mafia figures like Cohen and Giancana treated him as a friend of the family. According to one source, even Sammy's car and finances were once appropriated by a syndicate boss as a deal gone awry. He had to restore hundreds of thousands of dollars. In short, Davis's career and personal life repeatedly brought him into contact with organized crime figures. Further documentation underscores Sammy Davis Jr.'s deep entanglement in the underworld lineup of mid-century show business. FBI logs list him explicitly, demonstrating the Bureau regarded him as part of the orbit of organized crime culture. One vivid episode, when Davis's purported romance with Kim Novak, a white star under contract to Harry Cohen, stirred racial and power tensions. Organized crime figures stepped in via Cohen's mob-linked network to forcibly disrupt the relationship. Another government source records Davis being used unwittingly as a front in a racing scheme tied to racketeering interests. His frequent performances in mob-controlled nightclubs and casinos provided fertile ground for those associations to flourish. Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby's relationship with the mob was surprisingly transactional. The singer and actor was a high-stakes gambler in his youth, sometimes betting thousands in MAFIA games. When he fell behind on a gambling debt in 1930, FBI records show he paid off a gangster $10,000 to avoid violence. More dramatically, FBI memoranda reveal that mobsters sent Crosby explicit extortion letters. One file quote reads, "Bing Crosby, send me $6,000. If you don't send it, you will be put to death." The Mafia regarded Crosby as wealthy prey. In fact, FBI agent Clyde Tolson later said Crosby's army of fans and publicists worked furiously to conceal that he had been essentially forced to settle with a mob boss. Crosby even faced raids at his own private clubs alongside other stars. He famously was present with Bob Hope when police busted a mob-run gambling den in Hollywood. Though Crosby himself was never proven to be a willing mob ally, these FBI files make clear that he was dealt with by gangsters, extorted, threatened, and ultimately compelled to pay money to organized crime figures. According to FBI documents and investigative commentators, Bing Crosby's gambling habit plunged him into the world of organized crime in surprising ways. In a 1947 anti-gambling raid at a Burbank, California den, the list of about 100 patrons included Crosby and Bob Hope. While Crosby was never charged with syndicate membership, these records place him clearly in the orbit of mob-controlled gambling operations and show how the underworld regarded him as wealthy prey. Al Martino. Al Martino, a singer of Italian descent best known for the Godfather role, Johnny Fontane, had documented mafia entanglements. In the 1940s, Philadelphia mobsters forcibly seized Martino's singing contract and nearly ruined his career. Fearing violence, the young Martino fled to New York until he cut a deal. He agreed to work for Capo Angelo Bruno in exchange for protection. Decades later, Martino's past loyalty paid off. Mafia author Sussman reports that in the 1970s, crime bosses opened Hollywood doors for him. In particular, reputed Genovese frontman Russell Bufalino is said to have engineered Martino's casting as Fontaine in The Godfather. The film's producer Robert Evans later quipped that Martino had taken Sinatra's voice. Sinatra himself had coveted the role and even sued. In short, Martino's career launch and big break both came via mafia intervention, first as a victim of mob extortion, then as a beneficiary of mob backing. Singer Al Martino was caught up in organized crime. Early on, Philadelphia mobsters seized his contract and later helped him land a key movie role. Martino himself admitted that early in his career, Philadelphia-based mobsters bought his contract. When he sought to break free, he recounted being beaten and forced to flee to England for several years. Later, according to multiple accounts, Martino leveraged his real-life tie to mob boss Russell Bufalino, described in some sources as his godfather, to pressure Hollywood producers into casting him as Johnny Fontaine in The Godfather 1972. While Martino was never charged with criminal wrongdoing, his story demonstrates how organized crime's influence could pivot an entertainer from victim to beneficiary within the same system. Lana Turner. Lana Turner's celebrity life repeatedly intersected with gangsters. Her fourth husband, 1958, was Johnny Stompanato, an enforcer for LA mob boss Mickey Cohen. The marriage ended in scandal. Stompanato was stabbed to death in 1958 during a violent confrontation in Turner's home. Officially, Lana's teenage daughter Cheryl Crane took the blame, but many reports suggest Turner herself delivered the fatal blow after years of abuse by Stompanato. In any case, the episode cemented Turner's mobster image. Turner had also briefly dated Stompanato before she married him, and she was acquainted with Cohen and other racketeers during her nightclub years. Even beyond Stompanato, Turner was rumored to have affairs with various underworld figures, and news reports of the era portrayed her as Hollywood's bad girl of the mob scene. By the late 1950s, Turner was firmly linked in the public mind to organized crime, a connection underlined by the murder that happened in her own household. Investigative accounts show that Turner's entanglement with underworld figures went beyond one marriage. Her partner, Johnny Stompanato, was an enforcer for Los Angeles mob boss Mickey Cohen and moved in deeply criminalized circles. In 1957, the pair became public, but the relationship was marked by frequent violence, threats, and blackmail-style pressure. That sequence of abuse culminated on April 4, 1958, when Stompanato was fatally stabbed in Turner's home. The case exposed how her life had intersected with organized crime violence. Tony Bennett. Crooner Tony Bennett's mafia story is a bit different. He benefited from mob-run entertainment circuits early in his career. In the late 1940s, Texas gangster Big Sam Mazzeo of Galveston brought top performers to his clubs, and Bennett was one of them. Maceo booked Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett to perform at Galveston's Beachcomber and Balinese Room. This tied Bennett's rise to a network funded by organized crime. Cleveland mob figure Mo Dalitz was later mentioned in the same context, as Maceo invested with him in Vegas casinos. Bennett himself has always denied any known mob affiliation, but a photo still circulates of him in Maceo's club alongside Sinatra. In short, Bennett's big break on the nightclub circuit came courtesy of a mob enterprise, even if the singer was not otherwise involved in crime. Records of the Maceo organization, the mob-controlled entertainment and gambling empire run by Sam Maceo and his brother Rosario Rose Maceo in Galveston Island, confirm that their signature venue, the Balinese Room later renamed, hosted nationally renowned performers, including Tony Bennett. Though Bennett consistently denied any personal involvement with organized crime, his ascent in the nightclub circuit is inseparable from venues financed and managed by the Maceos. By performing at the Balinese Room, a gambling and entertainment complex under mob influence, Bennett effectively leveraged their network and infrastructure. In other words, his early career benefit derived from organized crime-backed entertainment circuits, even if he remained professionally distant from the criminal side. Elizabeth Hurley. In the late 90s, Elizabeth Hurley, dazzling on screen, reshaping red carpet fashion, and commanding global attention, found herself whispering through the underworld of celebrity and crime, albeit indirectly. One persistent claim, reported by outlets such as the New York Post and other tabloid-adjacent investigations, says she was romantically involved with Dominic "Donnie Shax" Montemarano, also referred to as Donnie Shax, a convicted enforcer connected to the Colombo crime family. According to one version of the story, Hurley was seen with Montemarano in Beverly Hills, dining, walking hand in hand, amplifying rumors that the glamorous actress had crossed paths with the mob, inflected world of New York's organized crime. Montemarano himself served an 11-year prison term for blackmail and racketeering. Hurley's team responded by insisting the relationship was friendly and denied any deeper mob romance. Yet, even absent confirmation, the allegation gained traction because it aligned with her other intersections with the underworld adjacent cinema. For example, when she produced the film Mickey Blue Eyes, 1999, a mob comedy featuring Hugh Grant and real mob-connected names used for research, Hurley reportedly found herself at a dinner table in New York with men alleged to have mob ties, and Grant later claimed she became their princess. Whether or not Hurley knowingly entered into a relationship with a mob figure, the episode casts her in the liminal space between glitzy celebrity and the hidden networks of organized crime. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe's mafia connections are mostly hearsay and rumor, but some stories persist. One famous tale claims New York gangster Handsome Johnny Roselli helped jumpstart her film career. According to biographer Lee Server, Roselli and Monroe were close for a while, lovers according to some, and Roselli helped get Monroe her first prominent part in Ladies of the Chorus at Columbia. Other accounts link Monroe romantically to Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana and say the Mafia took an interest in her as part of the Sinatra-Kennedy saga. We should stress these are not confirmed in FBI files. Monroe's ties to Giancana remain speculative, but the connection is widely reported in biographies. Monroe's life intersected mob circles by proxy. For example, her second husband Joe DiMaggio knew Gambino hitmen, and Sinatra with mob ties became her close friend. In short, the most cited mafia link for Monroe is Roselli's role in her early career, along with various rumors about Giancana and Sinatra. Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor's connections to organized crime were more about her social environment than any direct involvement. She famously had an affair with Frank Sinatra, whose links to the mafia are widely acknowledged. She also invested time and business in Las Vegas casinos and moved in circles that included advisors to Howard Hughes, some of whom had underworld backgrounds. One anecdote often cited in mafia lore says Chicago boss Sam Giancana gifted her a pet dog, though it lacks independent verification. While there are no FBI files naming Taylor herself as a mafia associate, her world overlapped heavily with the glamorous intersection of Hollywood and the mob. Taylor later quipped that the mafia would surely approve of her lavish lifestyle, hinting at how aware she was of the circles she navigated. Beyond her famous dazzling screen presence and headline marriages, Taylor's nights at Las Vegas casinos placed her in the same rooms where mob money flowed freely. She accepted lavish gifts and traveled on jets owned by casino magnates whose fortunes were later found to be entwined with underworld syndicates. These associations were subtle. There are no public FBI files listing her as a target, but the social dynamic is telling. Her circle included men whose power was rooted in racketeering and illicit financing. On at least one occasion, she appeared at a private suite party in a casino resort where known syndicate associates were present, cementing her role as a social bridge between Hollywood glamour and the hidden machinery of organized crime. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow's gangster links date back to the 1930s. As a young star, she caught the eye of Atlantic City mob boss Abner Longy Zwillman. Zwillman fell in love with Harlow and lavished her with expensive gifts, a jeweled bracelet, a red Cadillac, even arranging a studio contract for her. According to Zwillman's biographer, he even lent MGM chief Harry Cohen a large cash payment to sign Harlow to a two-picture deal. In short, Harlow's early career was effectively financed by a mob figure's money. This may have contributed to her nickname, the Blonde Bombshell, literally funded by gangster Cohen. While Harlow herself was not charged with any crime, FBI and newspaper archives of the time note Zwillman's involvement in Hollywood and his ownership of her contract. The upshot is that Jean Harlow was one of the few Golden Age actresses whose rise was directly bankrolled by organized crime. Peter Lawford. Peter Lawford's mafia involvement was largely in the context of his friendship with Sinatra and his connection to the Kennedy family. Lawford was married to JFK's sister Patricia, making him the Kennedys' liaison to Sinatra's mob-infused circle. In 1961, when Sinatra's underworld friends like Sam Giancana feared FBI pressure, Sinatra sent Lawford to Washington to talk some sense into Attorney General Robert Kennedy. The story goes that JFK's aides quietly instructed Lawford, "Stay out of this one, Kennedy," and Sinatra's attempt to leverage his mob allies into political favors collapsed. Lawford himself was on FBI radars for gambling and missing tax issues, but his most famous mafia link was acting as go-between for Giancana and the White House via Sinatra. After the Kennedy administration distanced itself from Sinatra, Lawford fell out with his friend and never fully regained Sinatra's protection. All told, Lawford's name appears in both FBI and memoir accounts as the Rat Pack insider who got enlisted in the Sinatra-Giancana saga, Clark Gable. Clark Gable never joined the mob, but the mafia tried to shake him down. In 1940, MGM Studios called in the FBI after Gable received several threatening letters demanding money. The note warned, "If you know what is good for you, do as I say, and no G-men." Studio executives, including Louis B. Mayer, feared that Gable was about to be extorted by a racketeer, so the FBI took action to protect the star's safety and finances. Ultimately, those letters turned out to be a crank scheme unrelated to real gangsters, and an obsessed fan was behind it. But the case shows that even Hollywood's top king of Hollywood was targeted by underworld-style threats. It also confirmed MGM's willingness to involve federal agents to handle mob-style intimidation. In the end, Gable's only confirmed mafia encounter was as a potential victim. He had to rely on FBI help to neutralize a classic mob extortion attempt. In the months following the extortion scare, MGM executives quietly placed Gable under a protective watch, concerned that even if the letters proved to be from a crank rather than an organized crime syndicate, the appearance of mob-style threats around their top star risked serious damage to the studio's image. Gable himself kept publicly silent, continuing to fulfill his contract obligations and maintain the charismatic King of Hollywood persona while privately working with studio security and the FBI. Although the threat in this case turned out to be a bogus claim, one from a farmhand in Iowa, signing a victim's name and sending letters demanding $1,000 and threatening, "If you know what is good for you, do as I say," and "No G-men," the incident underscored the vulnerability of major stars to gangster-style intimidation and forced Hollywood studios to adopt tactics typically reserved for organized crime victims. Over time, the event passed into Gable lore, not as proof of his criminal collusion, but as a reminder that even a star of his stature could become a target of underworld-style pressure. Judy Garland. Judy Garland had minimal personal ties to organized crime, but her career did brush up against it in odd ways. She was protected by the FBI against obsessive fans once an attempted kidnapping, but no evidence shows the mafia influencing her film work. However, Garland's legacy does involve a mob twist. In 2005, a convicted ex-mobster admitted he stole Garland's famous ruby slippers from the Oz Museum. He was told by an associate that the shoes held real jewels, and he later confessed the crime in court. So while Judy herself was not mob-connected, her most iconic memorabilia ended up in the hands of organized criminals. In short, Garland dealt with the underworld only indirectly, once as an FBI case for fan threats, and later as a victim of a mob-related heist of her movie props. George Raft. George Raft was an actor known for playing gangsters on screen, and off-screen, he actually grew up with them. Raft grew up in Manhattan's Hell's Kitchen, a hotbed of mob activity, and in his memoir he admitted befriending real gangsters. When LA mob boss Bugsy Siegel arrived in Hollywood, Raft reportedly helped get him an audition for a movie part. Siegel later became Raft's personal friend. One infamous anecdote: when James Cagney as SAG president angered the Chicago mob and a contract was taken out on Cagney's life, it was Raft who intervened to call off the hit. Raft's closeness to the rackets even kept him out of some film roles. He once turned down the role of Sam Spade because he refused to play a gangster for the guys I know. In sum, Raft's entire career was shadowed by the mob. He socialized with them, did favors for them, and used his fame to mediate underworld conflicts. Raft's off-screen life increasingly mirrored the gangster roles he portrayed. Federal records reveal that between 1944 and 1967, a 127-page dossier was compiled on him by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, in which Raft admitted knowing figures such as Benjamin Bugsy Siegel and others associated with the late Prohibition-era Big Six. In the 1950s, Raft fully stepped into the casino world. He was hired as a greeter and part owner of the Capri Casino in Havana, an establishment under the control of mobsters such as Meyer Lansky and Santo Traficante Jr. When the Cuban Revolution led by Fidel Castro took over, the casino and its fortunes collapsed. Raft's investment and status evaporated. Across the Atlantic, Raft was also linked to the London gambling scene. In the early 1960s, he was involved with the Colony Sports Club, a front for American mob investment. British authorities eventually declared him undesirable and barred his re-entry into the UK. While Raft never stood proven as a formal mobster himself, his life intersected repeatedly with the era's underworld infrastructure: casino deals, mob-financed clubs, federal investigations, and personal friendships with major gangland figures. James Cagney. James Cagney was another Hollywood heavyweight who fought the mob with help from friends. As head of the Screen Actors Guild in the early 1950s, Cagney clashed with labor racketeers tied to the Chicago outfit. One story from a 2024 historian says, the mob placed a contract on Cagney for refusing to play ball with their schemes. When the hit was arranged, Raft, a longtime friend, supposedly got word and persuaded the gangsters to cancel it. At the same time, Cagney starred in many anti-gangster films, and he refused to portray organized crime figures after White Heat. There is no FBI vault on Cagney himself, but mob influence threads ran through his era. He would later testify before a Senate crime committee about mob activities in Hollywood. In short, Cagney's mafia involvement was adversarial. He was targeted by organized crime and needed friends to protect him. Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis, born Bernard Schwartz, was one of the major screen stars of the 1950s. And while he had no known criminal dealings, his early life and roles intersected with the gangster milieu. Curtis grew up in a tough Brooklyn neighborhood and even ran with street gangs in his youth, though he later joined the Navy during World War II. In Hollywood, he frequently played mobsters or shady characters early on. Notably, he won an Oscar nomination for playing a racist boxer chained to a black man in The Defiant Ones. a film about crime and redemption. There is no evidence Curtis ever conspired with real gangsters, but his closest brush with the mob world was through his work and personal connections to Sinatra. He was Sinatra's lodger for a time and introduced Sinatra to second wife Anita Ekberg. We include Curtis as a golden age star who performed frequently within stories of organized crime, even if he himself was never implicated in any mob activities. The golden age of Hollywood was as much shaped by organized crime as by studio heads and talent scouts. Many movie and music stars of the 1930s to 1960s found themselves entangled with the mafia, willingly or not. In some cases, mobsters simply financed their careers. Jean Harlow, Al Martino, and others stars owed protection money, Bing Crosby, or literal protection Clark Gable. The Rat Pack era highlighted this overlap. Sinatra, Martin, Davis, and others socialized openly with underworld figures. Even female stars like Lana Turner and Ava Gardner became housewives of mob henchmen. As a result, popular culture absorbed these connections. Mobster moguls became part of Hollywood lore, and mob-associated tales inspired a host of films and books. The image of the mobbed-up movie star left an enduring legacy. From The Godfather to Casino, audiences remain fascinated by the idea that behind the glamour and glitter of the pictures, real-life gangsters were cutting deals and pulling strings. If you found this look into the past meaningful, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below.